Hi, everybody. Welcome and thank you so much for joining us today on our GenNext Amplify Lunchtime Live session. I think we're ready to get started now as we've allowed some people to join, and we'll get started with the program. While we're talking here this afternoon and getting started, we do have a small exercise that has been listed in the chat that we'd really love for all of you to try out. What we'd like you to do is really go back in time. For some of us, it's a little bit longer. And think about your first job. If you feel comfortable, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us just a little bit about that first job. As we're talking this afternoon, please feel free to jot that in, and we'll all have a look at that. So why don't we get started? If you have any technical issues at all, please feel free to use the chat box to send messages to the GenNext team who are here to help you. And please note that we will be recording this session and the content will be used for future promotional purposes. And let's get started in just a moment. If this is your first session with us, thank you so much for making time in your day to be here. If you attended a session yesterday and are here again today, we're really happy to have you back. My name is Kelly Myrtle, and I'm a Senior Director, Community Initiatives in Community Services here at United Way East Ontario, and I'm so pleased to be moderating this afternoon's panel. Before we begin, I would like to note that we, GenNext East Ontario, acknowledge that our offices located in the Ottawa region are on the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Anishinaabe Algonquin Nation, whose presence here reaches back to time immemorial. Each and every day, we are grateful to live, work, and play on this land. While I have the opportunity, let me run through some of the tech items so that you're all comfortable navigating the platform this afternoon. You can use the raise hand function at any point to get to the GenNext team to get their attention and their help. Should you have any questions for any of our panelists, you can submit questions for the Q&A session by clicking on the Q&A button, also found at the bottom of your screen. Questions can be submitted at any point during the event, but please keep the language and dialogue appropriate and respectful. We do have awesome moderators who will be watching submissions closely. You can also use the chat for all other inquiries, and our moderators will try to get back to you as soon as possible. We will be sharing relevant links throughout the sessions in the chat, so check there for important and relevant information. We're all gathered here today. Thanks for our very trusty event sponsors, Tech Savvy, who have made GenNext Amplify possible. And we'd really like to thank you for your continued support, Tech Savvy. We'd also like to thank our session sponsor, the Employment Accessibility Resource Network, also known as EARN. The team at EARN helped shape this panel, and we deeply appreciate their partnership with GenNext, and we'll work with them to ensure that we keep you all informed. Thanks to EARN for also providing closed captioning services for this session to help create a more accessible engagement. EARN is a community initiative led by United Way East Ontario that brings together in partnership employers, service providers, and other stakeholders with the goal of increasing employment opportunities for people with disabilities and promoting inclusive and accessible workplaces. We'll share a link in the chat box for you, and we hope that you are interested in enjoying EARN. So in today's session, we'll be discussing how to support an inclusive workplace culture with a panel discussion about inclusion and employment for all spectrums of diversity. Our panelists will be offering 3 different perspectives on this subject with lived experience, an employer perspective, and the research that goes into shaping better practices and identifying gaps in the labor market. So it's now time to welcome our incredible panelists, and we're so lucky to be enjoyed by Sowmya Rajasekaran, creator of Build Up Women, who will be sharing a personal perspective on professional experiences around inclusion and employment. After being laid off during COVID-19, Sowmya began checking in with her community and as a result launched Build Up Women. It's an incredible series. It's an online community that aims to inspire, educate, share, learn from, engage, support, and build each other up during and post-COVID-19. Sowmya also works at the Ontario Disability Employment Network, also known as ODIN, in diversity and inclusion, with a clear focus on innovation, impact measurement, and promising practice. Heidi Hauver, Vice President, HR and Talent, and the Core HR Leadership and Culture Advisor for Invest Ottawa and Bayview Yards, who will also speak to the employer perspective. Invest Ottawa has really taken a bold approach to attract the best talent. And finally, Lianne Berne, who is the Research Manager for the Employment Initiatives here at UWEO East Ontario. Her current research is focused on youth employment and local solutions for marginalized youth to overcome barriers in the labor market. So hi to you, everyone. We'd like you each to take a moment to very briefly introduce yourselves and share your first job experience, and maybe one key transferable skill that you developed. So why don't we start with Sowmya? Hi, Sowmya. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Hi, Kelly. Thank you so much for having me. So hello, everyone. My name is Sowmya Rajasekaran, and I am the creator of Build Up Women. And I'm also currently working with ODIN, specifically in diversity and inclusion with the core focus on innovation, promising practice, and impact measurement. So thank you for that great question that was presented earlier. I had to think about it a little bit. So my first experience, so I come from an immigrant family, so we moved into Nova Scotia. So my first experience was working in a restaurant as a hostess, and reflecting on that experience, made many mistakes. However, the skills that I didn't really recognize as skills really shined during my time at the restaurant, working at the restaurant, and that really kind of stems from being able to strike a conversation with individuals who I've never met, so being a hostess, and really helped me with problem solving, and also very important is in financial literacy as well. So that's something I didn't reflect on until recently. So thank you that was a great question. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Sowmya. And it's amazing, you know, if we look at sometimes the silver lining and the resilience, right? What the situation that we're put in, and then the resilience that we need to use in order to move ahead. And then what comes from that, the skills, the new skills that we learn, or the new opportunities that we can draw upon. We're really looking forward to hearing more about your story. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Why don't we go next to Heidi? So hi, Heidi. Great to see you.
Hi. Great to see you, Kelly. Great to be here. Always happy to support the United Way team. I shared my first jobs as a student in the chat, but I'll share my first professional experience. I moved to Ottawa about 22, 23 years ago, and I was an executive assistant or an admin assistant. And, you know, we all do have to start somewhere. And that role really helped shape some incredible transferable skills that I still use today. You know, being able to type and connect and talk to someone. I mean, I can actually type on the keyboard and not ever look at my fingers because I learned how to type, in that capacity, I think a lot of us, being able to develop those organizational skills, demonstrate that dependability, being able to connect with, individuals that we don't know, all of those skills were transferred throughout my career. And that definitely, I do always reflect back on that time with fondness, although I'm sure I would have wanted to be in a different place at the time. I really did try to be as present as possible and gain as many skills as I could. And they have stayed with me over the last 20, 23 years.
Yeah, fantastic, Heidi. Again, it's some of those really basic skills that we learn that are integral to the work that we do today and as we progress in our careers, for sure. Thank you. And Lianne, how are you doing today? And thank you so much for joining us.
I don't know what I did, but glad that fixed it. So my first job, I was working in this local outlet store for clothing, and I ended up being stuck in the underwear department all summer. It wasn't the most relevant thing for the rest of my career, but I will say it's interesting, as Sowmya alluded to this, the customer service element that is present in so many different jobs that you think are not really related to customer service. But even in my job now, having to have conversations with various community partners and establish that rapport. And, it is kind of customer service in a way.
Yeah, absolutely, Lianne. Thank you for bringing that up. There's so many conversations that we have around the various tables that we have here at United Way, whether it's working with persons with disabilities, youth, Indigenous youth, newcomer youth. There's so much value in the first job that you have, especially if it's focused on customer service. You're learning, again, customer relationship building skills, conflict management skills, interpersonal skills, team building skills, and I think sometimes people underestimate the value of that very first job, especially in customer service retail, that really allows you to, again, create these really solid foundational skills that will carry you through conversations in the workplace, conversations personally, sometimes with your partner, as you work through sometimes just conflict management skills. And so these are really valuable competencies that we learn that can carry us forward. Thank you so much for sharing. These are really awesome stories, and I think these are going to be really developed a little bit further as we get into some questions. So why don't we start that off? And I do have a first question for each of you. So why don't we start off with Sowmya? And I really wanted to, again, thank you so much for joining us today. We'd love to hear a little bit more about your personal journey to employment. And can you give us a sense of the opportunities and the challenges that you faced?
Sure. Very untraditional pathway in terms of seeking opportunities, I have to say. So as I mentioned earlier, we immigrated into Nova Scotia. And so in a small village at that time, which is now a town called Truro, Nova Scotia, and we were one of few Indian families. So definitely faced racism and microaggression during their transition into a new culture, a new environment, a new country that introduced a winter to us. And during that time, it was really difficult, one, to find individuals to support you or find that sense of community, because I felt underrepresented or not represented in my community. So that was really a difficult transition to cope with and to process, and really progress into the new norm that I'm in at the moment. So as far as the opportunities are concerned, when it comes to applying, when it comes to interviewing, one of the challenges that I found out right away was not getting a call back even for the first step of interviewing, and not understanding why that was. So I wasn't getting feedback. So, and that really dawns on you after a long time of getting rejections that, something is wrong, and then your headspace, is really negatively affected. And then I quickly realized that I had to make my own path. And an example I could give you was where I just reached out to executives over LinkedIn, for example, and I directly messaged them saying, these are my skill sets, this is my resume, this is what I can bring, this is my why, hoping that someone will see my abilities when others didn't, and took that as a chance to at least start that first step towards an interview process. At least that was my hope. So thankfully, I had the strength in me to not give up, which is very underestimated. I find is that resilience is very underestimated, self-doubt. And so that really, really helped in my journey. So that was only the first challenge. The second challenge was, as I mentioned earlier, is not feeling represented once I'm within that workplace, in a workplace culture, not seeing myself, not having access to mentors. So those were really massive challenges. At that time, initially, I thought was normal, because I didn't have anything to compare it to. But then as time progressed, I realized it was a need that it has to happen in order for myself to have feeling as though I belonged in my work. So yes, so I will leave it there, but I feel like we'll get into it more later on. So thank you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think you've raised a couple of really good points there. Again, I think resilience comes in, access to mentors, feeling like you belonged. certainly things that that we can discuss a little bit more. I'm going to turn that to you, Heidi, and say, you know, what are some of the ideas that employers can consider today to enable a more inclusive hiring process to improve the candidate experience? But maybe we can broaden that a little bit more to say it's that journey, right? Not only from recruitment, but it also is onboarding, retention, right up through retirement. How can we help to ensure that that people are feeling that sense of belonging and that they have a place to grow?
Absolutely. And I'm going to build on what was already shared, because I think it is about creating that welcoming environment from the very moment that you connect in with a candidate, you know, responding to candidates in a timely fashion, right? That was raised. That is the challenge that employers face, but it doesn't need to be. You know, we have a lot of tools at our disposal now. And I think that, you know, automating those applicant tracking systems to respond, to reflect your personality as an organization goes a long way for candidates, that your application was received, or that you're not going ahead in the hiring process. I mean, there's no reason why we can't take that time to create those powerful moments for folks, even if it's a no. You know, how we deliver that no, I think, is really important. I think, you know, also, you know, when you're in the hiring process, forget the email, pick up the phone and call someone and say, you know what, listen, Kelly, it's been a great experience. I loved getting to know you. At this stage, we're moving ahead with another candidate, but we want to stay in touch with you, because it's about building that talent community. And I think that that's really, really important. The more you can pick up the phone and have those conversations, I think the better. Have a consistent hiring practice, I think, is really important. Ask for feedback from your candidates on what you could do to be better. You know, obviously we talk a lot about reviewing job postings, and that is different than a job description, right? The posting is really how you're representing yourself in the community. Make sure they're fair, make sure they're equitable, use gender decoder tools to review your language. And also look at everything you've posted. Do you need everything that you listed on that list? You know, one of the things we do that we get a lot of great feedback on, and I think has really helped us engage more amazing talent, is we actually have a statement that says, have some of this experience, but not all of this experience. But guess what? We still want to hear from you. So we're trying to encourage candidates to apply, even if they don't meet all the criteria we've listed out, but we're being mindful of what we're asking for. You know, be mindful of where you're posting. Make sure you're casting that net as far and as wide as possible, working with great organizations like EARN, Hire Immigrants Ottawa, our settlement agencies, OCISO, World Skills, and Intact. That has always been part of my talent acquisition strategy for years, and they've really helped me be able to reach talent that otherwise wouldn't have been able to find us. And that's really, really important. Ask for help. You know, ensure you've got an accommodation message in your interview, in your job posting, making sure that people know that if they need accommodation, you know, confidentially, they can reach out to someone in the organization and get that. You know, I think the establishment of hiring committees is getting more and more popular. So it's not just one person making the decision, but you're being able to introduce that candidate to a bunch of their colleagues that they potentially can work with and get different perspectives, I think is really helpful. And again, it's a two-way interview. So it gives the candidate an opportunity to explore who else they may be able to connect in with their organization. I also love the idea of sharing interview questions in advance, and also posting, you know, we were talking about this internally, a colleague was sharing, what about posting the actual process in the job application or the job posting? We share what the process is going to be so we can set those expectations up front. You know, we're remote right now, and we've all been doing interviews remote, and interviews are nerve-wracking for most of us. So I think, you know, we have to acknowledge with our candidates right away, please don't apologize if the dog is barking or if the kids are running in the background. We're there too, you know, we're all in this together. Acknowledge it, give them the opportunity to acknowledge what's happening behind the scenes, but also have empathy and understanding, because it's not a traditional environment that we're in right now. The other thing too I wanted to mention is, you know, give your candidates the opportunity to give pause, reflect, and answer their questions. So I like to start an interview with saying, Kelly, listen, you need some time during the interview to reflect on a question, please ask for it. That's okay. You know, kind of opening that door to say, you don't have, we're comfortable with silence. If you need some time to reflect, please make sure you take that. And the other thing I will say to employers is stop asking those silly questions to candidates. You know, I know sometimes we try to differentiate ourselves. There's a lot of ways we can differentiate ourselves and be as inclusive as possible. I was recently speaking to a class of students and we were talking about that. And some of the questions they were asked were just silly. You know, what kind of cereal would you be and why? What kind of fruit would you be and why? Those are questions that are cute, and perhaps there's a reason that you think you're asking, but unless you're going to be really clear on, I'm asking this question because this is what I'm hoping to get from this question, and here's the question, and I'm going to answer it first. I just don't think those questions are really fair. And so I like, you know, I try to stay away from some of those questions. Leave those maybe for the get to know you once you've engaged someone on a full-time basis.
Heidi, my goodness, I've got two pens going here and I am just right-handed. And so why I have two, I'm not sure. But I have taken a ton of notes and I'm so glad that we are recording this because I think you have really set out for us a ton of really incredible pieces of great advice. And, you know, having worked in the employment space myself for many, many years, a lot of this I'm finding extremely refreshing and great advice. We're not trying to trick people in an interview. You know, you want to get the best out of people during that interview. Let's set them up for success from the beginning. And that means being transparent in the beginning. And that means having them feel like they belong right from the get-go, right? Let's have a conversation. Let's talk about your successes. Let's talk about areas of development that we can help you with within this organization. And again, we're not trying to catch you in a loop so that we can say no down the road. You mentioned a couple of things that really intrigued me. And that was, and I know I want to get to Lianne in just a second, but you mentioned really kind of breaking down that job description into pieces that, you know, things that we require, not putting a job description that has 50 things listed in it, but what are really and truly the job requirements. The other thing that you mentioned was asking feedback of your candidates. I thought that was a really interesting element to really add in because I guess because why? Why would you do that?
Well, I think it's important because, you know, we do want to create an environment that everyone can be their authentic selves. And, you know, when you're honing your hiring process, especially as an organization, you're trying to improve and enhance, what better audience to ask but the candidates that are going through your hiring process. And it can be a subtle question at the end, you know, and when we're asking, you know, Lianne, do you have any other questions for us? And, you know, by the way, if you wouldn't mind, we'd love your feedback. Was there any questions that we didn't ask you that you would love to, you know, share with, you know, something you would like to share with us that we didn't address? I've been in many interviews throughout my career where I'm waiting for them to ask about a specific experience or I want to talk about a strength that I have and they don't ask that question. I would love to get that at the end and say, actually, yes, Lianne, I would love to share with you a project that I worked on that demonstrated these skills. And I think that we often sometimes underestimate that what's on a resume is there's a lot more behind the resume. And we don't always give the candidates the opportunity to ask that. And so asking for feedback on, you know, Lianne, is there anything we could have done differently in this interview to make this a more welcoming environment for you? Now, I recognize that sometimes put a candidate on the spot. So, you know, we may, you know, another idea, something I've done is I've done a little bit of a survey informally when I've reached out back to the candidate to thank them for their time. And that's something I didn't mention, but you know, when we're talking about creating powerful moments and talking about that candidate experience and creating those wow factors, thank the candidate for their time, right? Send that email that takes you 5 minutes after an interview to show appreciation and thanks. I think that can go a long way. And that's when you can say, like, if there's anything that you'd love to share with us, any feedback that you have, you know, we'd welcome that. You know, feedback is a gift. And I think we need to lean in and engage with our candidates because they can support us in improving our hiring practices.
Excellent. Thank you, Heidi. I'm going to turn it now to Lianne and ask you a kind of a two-parter, Lianne. And so one is that, you know, we have heard a little bit of some of the challenges that people face entering the labor market. And then we've heard, again, some of the great solutions potentially, or at least some really great recommendations for having, breaking down some barriers, having people feel welcome and hopefully establishing that workplace that allows for retention. So I know you're doing a lot of research for United Way with with regards to this space. So based on your current research, what would you identify perhaps as one of the biggest challenge for marginalized youth to entering the labor market? And then secondly, do you have any additional concrete examples of employers who are really doing some great things to kind of overcome these barriers?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me know if my sound gets weird again. So I think that what's important is, my work is looking at what we're generally calling marginalized youth. And I think it's important that although we're talking about this in the aggregate, it's important to note that that does encompass a lot of different populations. And when we talk about marginalized youth, we don't do so in order to sort of lump everyone together and say that, okay, they're all having the same experiences or they're all facing the same challenges. Because certainly, just on its face, youth with disabilities, racialized youth, Indigenous youth, members of the LGBTQ2S+ community, they all have very different experiences. And even within those communities, there can be extremely different circumstances. But the thing that ties all of those groups together is that they're trying to succeed in systems that aren't built for them. And when I'm talking about systems, it's everything. It's the education system, it's the healthcare system, it's employment, and it's sort of, the standards on which society has been built. And so what those challenges look like at the individual level definitely vary based on, life experience, career interests, any number of other factors, as well as the intersectionality of any of those identities with each other. But there are definitely some sort of themes and trends that come up for all of these different groups, and we've talked about some of them already. So one big thing is that, again, because all of these youth are trying to succeed in these systems and sort of fighting against discrimination and barriers in a number of different ways, a lot of times their issue with accessing the labor market or getting into employment are not what you would normally think of as employment issues. So when you think about what are the supports that somebody needs for employment, you think, okay, they need to learn how to write a good resume and cover letter. They need to know how to do, an interview skills, what websites they should use to look for jobs. And those are all definitely very important. But there's also this whole category of sort of employment adjacent needs that are they're not employment needs, they're kind of life needs. But until those things are in place, you cannot focus on your professional career. So if you don't have good access to childcare, food security, affordable housing, particularly now technology and internet access, there's no way that you can have the mental capacity in your day to be thinking about, oh, I really need to brush up my resume right now. If you don't have someone to watch your toddler while you go to an interview, you're never going to make it to that interview. So that is, I think, a huge piece that is important to recognize, is that, all of that is tied up into employment and you can't separate those. Another huge issue is everything that Sowmya talked about, the lack of representation and inclusion. And again, through all levels, it's, when you're in school, who do you see from your teachers? Are people like you streamed into the academic stream, or are they streamed into the applied streams? Also, I don't know if they're called that. I'm not from Ontario, and so I'm still learning these terms. But those different pathways within the schools. When what is the messaging that you're getting from society, from your family about post-secondary education and whether you should do that or should you go into the trades? Not to mention, you get into the workplace, and it's not only, do I see myself represented in this employer? Do I see myself represented at the management level within this field in general? And without that, it's not only, that's sort of two different issues, right? Because it's not only that there's no representation, it's not necessarily that because there's no one that looks like me at the management level, that means that I'm going to experience discrimination. It might not mean that, but you can't fault youth for thinking, well, I'm not sure, and so more likely, because of all of these barriers and discrimination that I have faced, that's what I would expect from someone given no other evidence to the contrary. So there's also a sort of self-selecting out, right? So it's about both showing them that they have an opportunity to succeed here because others like them are succeeding here, and that mentorship aspect, that they can go to someone who maybe has a similar background or can sort of understand where they're coming from more and get advice and bounce ideas off of them. So that's so important for all of these different groups that we're talking about. And particularly for youth, you know, again, we talked so much about how that first job is so crucial to kind of setting your initial skills and learning. I don't know, for me, it's also about like learning about what you like and don't like, and how that sort of shapes your future career as well. To your second question about specific employers. So there's sort of a whole discussion to be had about the role of post-secondary education, and sort of how that plays into somebody's professional journey. I think that there's a lot of talk about, you know, about university and how that's, you know, you get a degree and then that's going to set you up for the labor market, and, you know, that's how you get a job. It's a little overblown, to be honest. I mean, university is great and it has a lot of goals, but I think that, you know, the way in which universities see themselves and the way in which potential students and parents see universities don't align. So in 2015, McKinsey did a large-scale study of Canadian universities and colleges. They surveyed educational providers, students, and employers to say, hey, do you think that these university degrees are preparing students for the workforce? And when you ask the universities and the colleges, they say 83% of them will say, yes, our youth are prepared, we're getting graduates ready to work, we're doing a great job. If you ask the employers, only 34% will say, yes, the graduates are ready for the workforce. It's a huge gap. And part of the reason is, if you ask universities, what are your priorities? Getting students ready for a job is not in the top 3. It's not even in the top 5. It's number 8 out of 10 priorities. And so if people are going to university saying, I'm going to go because this is going to prepare me for a job, that's an unrealistic expectation, unfortunately. And so there's a miscommunication there. So with that, I have been having some really interesting conversations with Shopify, which is Ottawa-founded company, which now, of course, is this huge international tech firm. So they also saw this problem, and it was a big issue for them because as they were growing their teams, they were seeing, okay, we need to hire a ton of people. We're trying to hire these computer science graduates, and they're not ready for the workforce. So the issue that Shopify was finding was that you get these computer science graduates and their technical skills are awesome. They're so good at coding, but they don't have any of those soft skills. They don't have the interpersonal team skills, the time management skills that they really need in their programs, because they need people to be able to work across different teams with different time zones, across different, you know, cultural sensitivities and these sorts of things. And the universities just weren't preparing students for that. You know, you think about when you had to do an assignment in university, what do? You go home, you work on it by yourself, and if you ask somebody else for help, it's cheating. But that doesn't look like your job. In your job, if you have a question, you can ask somebody, you can get help. And so, so Shopify saw this and they said, okay, this isn't working. So what we're going to do is we're going to partner up with these institutions so that we can create a program that's going to create graduates that we want to hire. So that we're going to create this pipeline. You know, if we want to see better graduates, let's be a part of the solution. So Shopify created this program called DevDegree in collaboration with Carleton University, and now they're also partnered with York University. And it's a really cool program where students come in from day one. They are taking courses at computer science at those universities, but they're also employed as Shopify interns. They get paid. They get a scholarship to cover their tuition costs, and they're working at Shopify like 20 to 25 hours per week. They do this for 4 years, so that at the end of those 4 years, they have their degree, but they also have basically 2 years of full-time work experience. And it makes a lot of sense, not only, I mean, obviously that's a great deal for the students, right? But also for Shopify, they've now created this talent pool, which, you know, A, has a lot of loyalty to their company, and B, has all the skills that they need. So it's a relatively recent program. Their first cohort started in 2016, so it just graduated right into COVID-19. But almost all of them, almost every graduate stayed with Shopify as a full-time employee afterwards. And they were ready, you know, they didn't have to do that onboarding process. They didn't have to teach them those teamwork and professional skills because they had been doing that this whole time. So I think that's a really cool example of an employer partnership. And another thing that I think is really admirable about this program is that they have a fully blind admissions process. So when a student applies for this program, the application committee, they don't look at their name, their ethnicity, their background. They don't even care if the student has previous experience with computer science. And that I think is so key. They explicitly say, okay, we're going to recruit based on potential. Because you think about who are the kids that have had experience in computer science? They went to schools that had the resources to offer that, or they come from a family and a background that had the resources that they could do that in the summer as an extracurricular because they didn't have to work to earn money to support their family or provide care for another family member. You know, not everyone is going to have those opportunities available to them. So Shopify said, okay, we don't care if you've ever done it, but we want you to be curious. We want you to like problem solving. We want you to like math a little bit. That's all we need. And what has happened is when you look at the student population of the dev degree program, that student population is a lot more diverse than the overall computer science population. It's 50% women, which is very uncommon in computer science. And I think that it's heartening to see that because I think so often people think, okay, well, if you're aiming for diversity, then you've got to create these quotas and you have to make sure that, you hire enough Indigenous people. It's not about that. It's about removing the barriers in the whole process, and that's how you create diversity.
Thank you so much, Lianne. Again, a lot of really great gold mine of information there, and certainly some really great best practices that people can take away. We are hearing a lot. I think one of the silver linings of COVID, if you want to put it that way, is a little bit of this flexibility, right? So employers are learning how to recruit in a different way, interview in a different way. Some of the formality is coming away, it's lessening, which is a good thing because again, it opens up dialogue. It allows people to kind of shine in their own way, hopefully, and allow for just that better dialogue so that we have more success. It's also allowing organizations to go, you know what, we need people. And so instead of this continual formal process that takes forever and a day to get someone hired, then we need to be more innovative and think about ways that we can actually go back a little bit to the days of, we can't expect people to be, as I call, fully baked to join our organization. We have to be able to mentor them when they get here and actually invest in them and train them, right? Which is going to benefit both the individual and the organization. And so we're hearing this with Shopify, with the Ottawa Hospital, and these are some really great practices that are going to help both, again, the candidate and the organization, and quite frankly, our economy, et cetera, going forward. Thank you for sharing. That's really great. I want to ask one last question of Sowmya before we go into the general kind of Q&A section. And again, it's a bit of a two-parter. And so if you can, two things. We've talked a little bit now about diversity, inclusion. We've been speaking here at United Way on a couple of our tables about equitable economic recovery, right? Ensuring that everybody has access. Just in maybe, again, as succinctly as you can before we get to the general Q&A, you had mentioned in your own experience about, the lack of mentors, and especially in your early career, the need or the want for mentors. How again, in your experience, Sowmya, might you describe what that inclusive workplace is for you, so that you're sharing some of those best practices with employers? And then please finish up for us today and tell us about how you started the Build Up Women series, because I don't think we can leave today without recognizing this really cool initiative that you are so innovative at creating. And so again, within a few minutes, if you can kind of put that in a little capsule for us.
Sure. Well, I think first and foremost is the understanding of the fact that you can't have diversity without inclusion. It's one of the most important things. It's that feeling of, it's very simple, but yet unfortunately it hasn't been implemented as smoothly. Is feeling included and feeling that sense of belonging. So a perfect example is being at the table but not having the opportunity to speak up is the perfect example of diverse but not inclusive. So it's really important on so many levels because it clearly drives collaboration. It changes the morale. It reduces retention. And if anything, it improves performance within the organization. And also having those positive kind of engagement within your team members is crucial. But also important is for organizations to know what they're not achieving. It's being okay and feeling comfortable with that uncomfortable feeling, but saying that, okay, this is uncomfortable. What are we going to do about it? So accountability is incredibly important for organizations to fulfill that. Without it, it's just words without anything. So that's kind of really key. And that's what I faced in the organizations that I worked for previously, is not having that sense of belonging or didn't feel, it wasn't a positive work atmosphere. And you can feel it when you feel in yourself and you're saying, I can't wait till it's 5 so I can get out of here. That's a huge flag that you're not happy and it's really affecting your headspace. And people should feel really happy and looking forward to going to work and feeling energized and supported like a second family. And it's not the case, unfortunately, most of the time. And that's what really needs to change, but change can't happen without accountability. So it's that, yeah. So I hope that answers your question. And with my journey with Build Up Women series started so rapidly. And I started a new journey last year. And like many others, were really looking forward to kickstart your next, pathway in your career. And then COVID hit in March. And unfortunately, I was laid off as a result of that. So like many, I had to process multiple things, really understanding, well, one, what happened, if it was my fault. And the other thing is processing the transition of a new norm during the pandemic and processing the layoff, and also really trying to figure out what my next step was going to be in a world that was laying people off. So that was a huge coping mechanism, and really trying to, navigate that. And also navigating being a parent during the pandemic. So all of the above. And I felt that I wasn't alone in my thoughts, and I wasn't sure if there was enough reach out or support into the community to check in and ask these questions and understand how individuals were coping. So that's what I wanted to do, and reached out to many people internally and externally in my communities, and just asking about their struggles, and just listening and being present. And those conversations really inspired me to create Build Up Women, and to bring kind of core issues and matters that were otherwise not discussed or went undiscussed to the forefront of these conversations, and having a core focus on inclusion, which is something that I had never been a witness to throughout my life so far. And that's something I really wanted to commit to. So we started in March in 2020, and since then had over 10 great live series events, really talking about economic abuse in Canada, talking about job loss and creating opportunity. So women who have never entertained the entrepreneurship space, going into the entrepreneurship space during the pandemic, because there aren't any other alternatives. Talking about education during the pandemic from the perspective of students, not so much the school boards or parents. So it was a wonderful, wonderful experience, and a vulnerable experience, really. to see all of these incredible women coming forward and sharing their stories and really picking each other up. What was really amazing about the conversation was that I didn't want it to just be a conversation because there are so many of them. I wanted to create a space where resources can be shared and mentors can be created during those conversations. So it's just connecting individuals to people and creating opportunities on your own and creating change within your own community and the organizations that you're working for.
Well, congratulations. It's such a wonderful initiative, and I'm sure many people have been impacted by that. So thank you. That's very courageous and well done.
Thank you.
Listen, I really want to extend a really big thank you to all of you for sharing your perspectives, your ideas, your personal stories. This has really been a wonderful panel experience. And I know, like I said, I took away many notes, and I hope that many have as well. Your comments were very insightful and really, I think, taught us all a little bit about how to create a more inclusive workplace. The next section is supposed to be also a Q&A. So this is, I am going to ask a little bit I am going to ask you one question to start as we look in our chat to see if any other questions come in. So I am going to ask one more question of each of you, and I'm going to try to keep it short so that if questions do come in, we can take it from the chat box as well. So my question for you is, again, just thinking along the theme of inclusion and really great workplaces, I want you to think about the perfect workplace. And it could be a place that you've worked before or one that you envision, one that you've created maybe. If you imagine the perfect workplace, what does it look like to you? What does it feel like to you? And maybe if you could describe that in just 3 words. So why don't we start with Lianne?
I had a whole answer ready, and then you told me 3 words. I'm going to say something simple: non-gendered bathrooms. Easy.
Excellent. Thank you. Sowmya.
People first.
Excellent. Heidi.
I would say passion and purpose. And I'll elaborate on what I mean by that. I think so often we do have passion for the work that we're doing. And I wish everyone to find that passion. And then I hope they find an organization where they're able to, find that purpose in that work as well.
Excellent. Thank you. I do have time for another question. Here it is. Who are you seeing in your community leading the charge to support inclusive spaces? And perhaps you could name a resource, a book, a social channel that you follow, for example, that folks could, again, take away as a tangible resource. So I'll say it one more time. Who are you seeing in your community leading the change or the charge to support inclusive spaces? So any resources that you could share as well. So why don't we start with Sowmya this time?
Sure. Well, oh my goodness, several come to mind. I don't want anyone else to feel bad. So one really amazing one comes, so this is actually through my journey through Build Up Women, and it's for many reasons. One, most importantly, is creating and reaching out to speakers and pitching my concept and having them say yes to me when they haven't met me or really known who I am. So one person that really comes to my mind is a woman named Wanda Deschamps, who is a really amazing advocate for inclusion, and also is an autism mom who's incredibly outspoken about neurodiversity and inclusion in the workplace. So yes, so her one, but I have several, but just one person that really comes to mind. So if you are interested in learning more, you can always just find her on LinkedIn, and she essentially runs Women for Women campaign as well. So she's really about women empowerment and women building women up. So.
Excellent, thank you.
Thank you.
Why don't we go to Heidi?
I'm going to take a bit of a different approach. I think you mentioned, what are we reading? What are we listening to? That, I am taking a leadership and inclusion class actually with Centennial College, and one of our textbooks has been a book I'm highly recommending to anyone really. It's called Inclusion Dividend: Why Investing in Diversity and Inclusion Pays Off. And it's by Mark Kaplan and Mason Donovan. It's excellent. I think it moves beyond the business case, but it is really a great book that I think would help anybody at any point in their journey from a business perspective. So I just wanted to make sure I mentioned that. I mean, I think that one of the things, we're all on a different journey and our pathway. And I think, as leaders, we need to continue to build awareness, gain more knowledge. And I think, I'm an avid reader, so I look to books to be able to gain that. But this is one that I've really enjoyed. I'm not yet finished, but I've thoroughly enjoyed it and highly recommend it.
Excellent, Heidi. Thank you so much. And Olga put it in the chat box for us, the link to the book. Thank you. And Lianne.
I will throw a link in the chat as well. So I have been really heartened to see all of the trainings and organizations that are starting to take a more intersectional lens to the work that they do. And something that I think that I came across that I think is really intriguing is this Positive Spaces Initiative out of this acronym, which is Ontario Council of Agencies Serving Immigrants. So these are trainings that they created for service providers that are aimed at newcomers to help educate them specifically on how to work with newcomers who are from the LGBT+ community. As someone who is both a newcomer and from that community, it's very specific to my interest, but I think it's really key because I think that it can be really challenging to find resources that are really targeted like that. So again, I think having online options and self-guided options come out of all of our work from home will be really exciting to see.
Super. Thank you so much, Lianne. That's great. And we do have one final question for you, Lianne, that came in the chat. And it's from Fran in the audience. And it's based on your description of Shopify's work. So the question is, what's a good way for more potential employers to transition into Shopify's more inclusive style of employer scholarship partnerships?
Yeah, so I think, certainly Shopify is in a unique position to have the resources to dedicate to this kind of program. They have folks who can spend a good chunk of their working day, mentoring these students and setting up the application process. And certainly not everyone is going to have that, but I think that being able to partner with educational institutions, whether that's high schools or universities or colleges, is a first place to start. A lot of those institutions are going to be open to different types of partnerships. And even without the scholarship aspect to it, I mean, again, a small or medium business might not have the financial resources to commit to something like that. But even just to have something built into the curriculum where you can work with students directly or work with curriculum developers directly is going to create a really huge opportunity. And again, I think particularly there's an opportunity now with universities and colleges because in the past, decade or so, universities and colleges have been incredibly reliant on international students to basically, come in and that all of the growth that we've seen in the student populations in higher education in Canada in the past a couple of years has been because of international students, which is helpful because they pay a lot of extra tuition. Now that COVID-19 has hit and the international student population has, been completely decimated, basically, universities and colleges are going to need to find a way to make themselves stand out to domestic students. And I think that having a partnership with a local employer in order to demonstrate the value that this program is going to have to the graduate as a future job seeker will go a long way. So I think it's a prime time for employers to get in on that and start building up those partnerships.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Lianne. Listen, thank you so much, panelists. I learned a lot from you today, and I hope others did as well. In fact, I'm sure they have. Lots of resources that you've shared, again, and really great pieces of information that I think that we can all definitely incorporate into our own work that we do and our ways of thinking as well. So I really do appreciate all that you've shared. I know we're right up against time, and I do have a couple of really quick closing remarks. So I'm going to try and go on speed talk now and finish this up for all of us. So if you could just give me 2 more minutes. But once again, thank you very much to all of you. It's just been wonderful. I really wanted to thank everybody for joining us today and taking time out of your very busy schedules to help support GenNext initiative here, and for listening to our speakers. We really do hope that you enjoyed yourselves. I know I did, and I hope our panelists have as well. A huge thank you to Sowmya, Lianne, and Heidi for giving us such incredible information and a great presentation. And once again, a huge shout out to our program sponsor, Tech Savvy, and our session sponsor, EARN, the Employment Accessibility Resource Network that you can find on our United Way website. For those of you who are new to GenNext, welcome, and we do hope to see more of you. And as a reminder, please go to our website, gennexteo.ca, and sign up for the newsletter to stay up to date on all things GenNext. That link is popped up in the chat box for you, and we hope that you will check us out. And finally, if you are able to make a donation to our GenNext causes, just know that it is so appreciated, and any support we receive will help the most vulnerable in our communities. You can choose to support equitable employment and pave the way for a more inclusive employment in our region. So once again, thank you all. Have a wonderful Thursday. We do hope to see you at the happy hour session later this afternoon with none other than Pat Bolduc of Dominion City Brewing. So that's kind of exciting. That's awesome. And on behalf of myself and United Way East Ontario, please take care and be well. Thank you so much for joining us. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.